Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet. This is going to probably be another Hollywood production that butchers the real history, as they always do. But the real controversy that flared up here is the charge and allegation of cultural appropriation. How dare the anti-white Hollywood put a white guy for this role? Because Rumi wasn't white, right? Well, we're going to get the real backstory on this from Jason Reza Jorjani, the author of Prometheus and Atlas. Jason is an Iranian American of Persian and Northern European descent, and has a long interest in the real history of Iran and Persia. And I think everyone will be surprised because Jason argues that Rumi actually was white. But please don't forget to check out the full story, Rumi Was White, that Jason wrote for us on redeyes.tv for all the details, the more in-depth research, and the backstory to this brief interview. Explain to us, why was Rumi white?
Well, first of all, Rumi was a Persian, and the Persians are one group of Iranians, the culturally dominant ones. Iran itself is just shorthand for Aryana Khashatra, or Iran Shahr in Middle Persian, which means Aryan Imperium. The Iranians are essentially the eastern branch of the Aryan world. They're the Indo-Europeans who migrated eastwards rather than westwards. And despite the 7th century Arab Muslim invasion of the Persian Empire, the part of Iran in which Rumi was born remained largely white because it was furthest away from the front lines.
That's news, I think, to most people, that the fact that Iran used to be white. I think that would be a shock to most people to learn it, but you're saying that before the Arab invasion, these were European-looking people there.
That's right, and there was a second huge wave of miscegenation, forced miscegenation, that resulted in this demographic shift in Iran. And this occurred about a decade after Rumi was born. The Mongols poured into Iran from the east, and in fact, Rumi wound up in Anatolia because his family was fleeing successive waves of the Mongol invasion.
When Rumi was alive in the 1200s, what were the conditions like?
No, you had a white country. The area certainly where he was born remained phenotypically identical to the population of Europe. And then the Mongols swept in from the east, and Rumi and his family were fleeing westwards. The interesting thing is that the Turks, who are related to the Mongols ethnically, were at this slightly before that, about a century or two before that, they had begun to migrate downwards into what is now Turkey, into what was then the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium. And frankly, their conquest of that area was as bloodlusting as the Mongol conquest of Iran. So when people try to appropriate Rumi as a Turk or a Mongol, or I don't know, even as an Arab, by trying to equate being Muslim with being an Arab, they are essentially handing over the Iranian heritage to the people who were responsible for the genocide, rape, and plunder of our country. So
that would be like saying, let's say, France or Germany in 50 or 100 years from now, and let's say if current trends continue with the invasion, it's like saying France is a Muslim country or something, right?
That's right. I mean, Rumi actually means the Roman, because Rum in Persian is the designation of Byzantium, or the Eastern Roman Empire. When Rumi and his family showed up there as refugees, that area was hardly Turkish. And by the way, the idea that his mentor, who was from Tabriz, the Iranian city of Tabriz, could have possibly been a Turk is preposterous. Shams was a native Persian speaker. And at that time, the Seljuk Turks had barely settled in that area. If this man were a Seljuk Turk, he would be speaking Turkish, not Persian.
Yeah. So what would you say to those SJWs and others that have this anti-kind of colonial message to us today, and say that somehow we are appropriating their culture when they know nothing of this history that you're talking about?
Well, actually, I have nothing to say to them, but what I have to say to fellow Indo-Europeans, and especially to Europeans, is that you should not allow this heritage to be stolen from you. Rumi is part of your cultural heritage. And what these social justice warriors are trying to do is to sever the history and culture of Europe from that of Iran, because the Persian Empire was uniquely tolerant and humanitarian. And what they don't want people to know is that benevolent Indo-European or Aryan colonialism is not only possible, we had it for centuries, and it bettered all kinds of people who lived within that realm. The Persians always aimed to raise the standard of living of all ethnicities and cultures within their territories. So on the one hand, they are trying to demonize European colonialism by isolating it from the history of Iran. And on the other hand, they're forwarding the false claim that white people can never be colonized. Iran was a great white empire that was colonized by brown and yellow peoples.